I've always been pretty sure the Elder Scrolls VI was going to be set somewhere in Hammerfell. Why? Well, take a look at this map. This is the Elder Scrolls Online's playable area, broken down zone by zone, over 10 years of content. You may realize there's a couple pretty massive chunks of open space. There's completely new islands being made to support new expansions, but for whatever reason, some of these areas are never touched. Two of these gaping holes make the most sense. One is in Black Marsh, but that doesn't really match the teaser they made 8 years ago, and the other is in Hammerfell, where no new content has been established in over 10 years. After a series of tweets, Reddit posts, and other insider sources, I've decided to lock myself inside the Kingdom of Sentinel within the Elder Scrolls Online, not leaving until it's 100% complete. We're gonna do every dungeon, every side quest, catch every fish, turn over every rock to hopefully find something, some minor clues about the upcoming game. This is what 15 years without an Elder Scrolls game does to the fanbase. Let's go over some important history first. What many people don't know is that ESO was in development before Skyrim. Oblivion was the reference material. Bethesda was working on Fallout 3 when ESO was being created. It was only after Skyrim took the world by storm, ZeniMax had to change gears to keep up with the hype. My point here is that at the start of ESO's development in 2008, no one knew where the Elder Scrolls VI was going to be set. They were allowed to basically go anywhere they wanted in Tamriel. But after the release of Hugh's Bane, a small DLC zone, for nearly 10 years, all Hammerfell content ground to a halt. They made completely new landmasses, but refused to touch this area. Why? Well, now we know. We've always known ESO's team has to run new developments and expansions by Todd Howard. They can't do whatever they want. They need a green light from Bethesda. So, without further ado, let's start our journey through the Kingdom of Sentinel as it was originally designed and approved by Bethesda. The Elder Scrolls Online takes place over 900 years before the events of Skyrim, so the political regions, rulers, and territories will be a little different. The actual Kingdom of Sentinel was established in the Elder Scrolls II Daggerfall 300 years after ESO, which I have played a bit of. As far as the main quest in that game, the first thing you do is find the Prince of Sentinel's brother. You then help his mom, the Queen, find a spooky painting. Then, at the end of the game, the Queen wants the Totem of Tiber Septim to get control of the Numidium. This is a colossal Dwemer construct with devastating power used by Tiber Septim to complete his conquest of Tamriel. We even see this machine on Alduin's Wall. Now, the Numidium shouldn't be in Sentinel during the Elder Scrolls VI, but I wouldn't be surprised if we get a quest or two about it. Okay, so now let's jump from Daggerfall to ESO, roughly 300 years further in the past. The Kingdom of Sentinel was not established yet, but the outline from Daggerfall matches up with the region of the Alik'r Desert. Now, I did complete Bangkorai, the neighboring zone, just in case, but we'll touch on that later in the video. There are a total of 6 delves, 1 public dungeon, and 1 group dungeon in this zone. The delves have 0 narrative value whatsoever, just fetch quests to tell someone in a town a relative died fighting monsters or some boring shit. One thing to note is that there is quite a high concentration of Dwemer content here. Almost half of the delves are some kind of Dwemer ruin, and throughout these you may sometimes find journal entries from an archaeologist named Thoraya looking for something called the Guardian's Eye. These clues eventually lead you to the group dungeon, Volenfell, an ancient dwarven city lost to the deserts. Only recently the secret entrance has been discovered. This lost city is also the place where Rurikin, a Dwemer chieftain, threw his hammer, Volendrung, towards the sky. The legend says he claimed wherever it would land, his clan would build their city. It landed here, in Volenfell. Get it? Volendrung fell? Volenfell? Anyway, you can see the impact zone of the hammer here, which is pretty neat. Giant goblins then drove out Rurikan and his clan from Volenfell and gave the Volendrung hammer to their lord Malakath as an offering. Of course, 900 years later in Skyrim, the Dragonborn would then wield this hammer after doing Malakath's Daedric questline. In ESO, the story of this dungeon revolves around the Guardian's Eye, a Dwemer artifact with mysterious capabilities. At the end of the quest, it's destroyed, or so they think. They're not exactly sure what happened, but it has the ability to summon the undead, and Theriah is no longer interested in researching it. It's possible this is the plotline for the dungeon in Sentinel, but I doubt it. To me, the way better fit here is Malakath's Daedric questline. It's perfect. You can learn how his loyal goblin servants overthrew the mighty Dwemer, and at the very end, at the exact impact site where Volendrung fell, he grants you the hammer. Let's be frank, there's no shot this dungeon isn't in the Elder Scrolls VI. It's a ginormous Dwemer city with vast history and Daedric lore tied to it. It exists across many games and many lore books. I think it's very safe to assume we will see Volenfell in some capacity. Public dungeons in ESO are a mix between the group dungeon and delves, and they usually have some kind of quest. In this case, the quest takes us to the lost city of the Na-Totambu, an ancient Yokudan ruin which was erected when the Crown Redguards first landed in Hammerfell, and it's actually named after the capital of Yokuda, which is kind of neat. The story goes, the Yokudans built this city to honor their original capital, but it was buried in a massive sandstorm, causing the population to flee. But there's still ancient Yokudan texts and artifacts buried inside, hinting at what life was like hundreds of years ago. That's exactly what the quest is about. A Redguard scholar wants to get his hands on ancient stone tablets to learn more about the Yokudan way of life, agriculture, and metallurgy. It's a pretty beautiful place, and the architecture style is really unique compared to the modern Redguard style, but as a dungeon, it's not super great. It's very small, it's basically one room, there's a puzzle and a few bosses, but you basically just prove you're worthy of the tablet to a Yokudan king, and that's it. The only reason we'd see this in the new Elder Scrolls game is because of its historical importance. It's named after the original Yokudan capital city and was supposedly created as close as possible to the original to best reproduce the culture. It's kind of like a fake time capsule. This is a glimpse at a replica of an actual Yokudan city, which is rare to find in Tamriel. And if you didn't know, Yokuda sank under the ocean. You can't go there anymore. Let's now touch on this zone's main campaign, which is 10 missions long and takes roughly 5 hours to complete. I'm gonna keep it a buck with you. I've done dozens of these videos before, and this story isn't great. However, most of it deals with Redguard and Yokudan lore, which is interesting. It's just everything else wasn't. We start off with meeting the King of Sentinel, and of course, he tells you of a rising threat. In ESO, that can be one of 3 things: an opposite faction, necromancers, or a Daedric cult. In this case, it's a group of necromancers called the Withered Hand. Woo, spooky. I would be shocked if we even hear a whisper about them in the Elder Scrolls VI. It's basically just a family feud between the royal family and the necromancer family. It's all contained in a nice little 40 or 50-year-old bubble, and it's not really worth going over because there's no way it carries forward. Anyway, the necromancers are trying to take over Hammerfell because of course they are. To do that, they need to control the 3 Ansai wards. These are important Yokudan artifacts, each with a bound warrior spirit. Now, although these are the primary plot device for this zone's story, there is no mention on Ansai wards anywhere outside of ESO. Similarly with their storage location, which is called, get this, the Impervious Vault. Not so impervious, I suppose. Both of these are the original creations for ESO. We might get a minor reference to these. Maybe the treasure room under Sentinel's Palace ends up being called the Impervious Vault as a callback. I don't know, but I wouldn't hold your breath for either of these. What I would expect to see are the Ashaba. this group of people do have a reference in the Emperor's Guide to Tamriel and are, well, they're basically Ashlanders from Morrowind. They're a nomadic tribe not accepted by the civilized houses of Redguard, but they occupy the vast desert scape of Hammerfell. The Ashaba lineage can be traced back to the First Era when the Yokudans landed on the shores of Hammerfell in the battle against the left-handed elves. We actually get to experience this firsthand in the main campaign. This is very cool. We take on the role of Prince Samir, and we cut through the elves with our brother, Prince Hakmir. Long story short, the elves kill our father, the king, and we have to decide what to do. The Yokudans and Redguards hold the honor of their dead as a very sacred belief. Even enemies are buried in massive crypts and tombs as a sign of respect. The left-handed elves resurrect our father as an undead, and we cut him down along with the necromancer responsible. This leads to us being exiled for touching his dead body and forming the Ashaba, while our brother takes our place on the throne and continues the honorable Yokudan lineage. You can see this reflected in the society of Redguards in the Elder Scrolls Online. The Ashaba follow the exiled prince, and everyone else in the cities follow the opposite. We don't know which prince did what. You have the choice as the player to do it yourself or send your brother to do it, but one of you gets exiled and one of you takes the throne. Unless there's a massive cultural melting pot before the Elder Scrolls VI takes place, I would highly expect to see both of these groups present in the game. Potentially, we could see this used in a similar way to Morrowind's plot, where you need the blessings of the tribes and the houses to become a sword singer or some shit. I don't know. But if the game is set around Sentinel, these two major cultural groups should be present. Next place we head in the main story is Tuwaka's throne. Tuwaka is an incredibly important deity in Yokudan culture, known as the tricky god and caretaker of the Far Shores. What are the Far Shores? Well, it's basically Sovngarde for Redguards, and you can bet your ass that's going to be in the Elder Scrolls VI, no doubts about it. You can actually visit the Far Shores in Bangkorai's main story. It's very purple. Anyway, Tuwaka was first referenced in Kirkbride's The Monomyth. It's probably safe to assume this god is in the next game in some fashion, so it's a good one to study up on. Tuwaka's throne is this giant temple, but it's kind of in ruins. It looks similar to our real-life Parthenon in Athens. It's possible it's been destroyed by the Elder Scrolls VI, but there's lots of interior areas. I would be surprised if this wasn't a dungeon at the very least. Next up, the main story takes us to HoonDing's Watch, where the player character is taken through the biggest challenges the Yokudans face to secure Hammerfell. The first are the conquering of the Nedic peoples, the forefathers of the human race, way back in the First Era. Saint Alessia was a pretty famous Need, for example. The second challenge they faced were the giant goblins. Again, we touched on this bit already from Volenfell. These freaks pushed out the Dwemer and were eventually pushed out by Frandar HoonDing, an incredibly important figure in Redguard history. There is zero chance Frandar HoonDing isn't a central figure, at least culturally, in the Elder Scrolls VI. This guy is like Hercules. He's almost mythological, but he was a real guy and did, without question, pave the way for what the Redguard race became today. Next up, we learn a bit about the sacking of Orsinium, when the Redguards and Bretons joined forces for nearly 30 years and just bullied the orcs because they were racist. They just didn't want the orcs as neighbors. It's kind of crazy. We learn more about this in Orsinium's main questline, which I have covered on the channel. I'll link that video down below. Orsinium would be a really cool DLC for the Elder Scrolls VI, but I kinda doubt we see it in-game, and I don't even know if one exists. I think the 4th or 5th Orsinium collapsed right around the time of Skyrim's main story, so it depends how big the gap of time is between the Elder Scrolls V and VI. We actually get to speak to Frandar HoonDing at the end of this. Kinda cool. His body isn't here. It's in the Hall of the Dead in Bangkorai, which is part of that zone's main questline, but again, I'll touch on that at the end of the video. As far as the rest of the main story goes, not much of importance. You kill some necromancers, find the 3 Ansai wards, and re-establish protection over the Yokudan and Redguard dead. The final area is in the Motalayan Necropolis. As I said, there's a big cultural importance on respecting the dead, so even the most powerful enemies have tombs in Hammerfell. One such tomb belongs to a necromancer who tried to overrun the King of Sentinel 40 or so years ago, and his daughter is trying to bring him back to life because his body is just chilling there, because Redguards don't get rid of their dead. She succeeds in resurrecting him, but it doesn't take us too long to bring him down, and that's the end of the story. Sentinel and its surrounding cities are saved. Let's move on to the largest portion of this video, notable points of interest. This zone has a total of 19 points of interest. In the Elder Scrolls Online, usually these locations have a corresponding quest or two, explains more about the surrounding area, or has some kind of story. I did every single one, and the amount that might be important for the Elder Scrolls 6 it's probably not a lot. Let's go over the major cities of the zone and determine if we'll see them in Sentinel. Obviously, I don't think we need to speculate about the capital city of Sentinel. We already went through this place a bit, but it's probably worth it to point out, besides broad strokes architecture style, I don't think these cities are going to be in the game shot for shot. ESO does have a little bit of a bad habit of doing that with fan-favorite locations like Satanine or Solitude. It makes absolutely no sense that these locations haven't changed in nearly 1,000 years, so I don't think you need to memorize their layouts. The other three major cities of this region are Bergama, Kozinset, and Sarakalam. I sure hope I said that right. All three of these cities are actual locations in the Elder Scrolls II Daggerfall, and save Bergama, actually are hubs for their respective regions. You can see both Kozinset and Sarakalam here. However, all of their questlines in ESO are likely unimportant to any upcoming game set here. Kozinset is overrun with Harpies, and Sarakalam is overrun with Imperials. Bergama has the most interesting story. The city is divided into Crowns and Forebears. If you are unfamiliar with these political groups, they were introduced in the Elder Scrolls Adventures Redguard, which technically does take place in Hammerfell off the island of Stros Makai. The Crowns are Redguard traditionalists, like the Stormcloaks in Skyrim, and the Forebears are Redguards that have adopted the Empire's gods and worldviews, just like the Nords who join the Imperials in Skyrim. Anyway, these are the other major cities in the region outside of Sentinel. Fair game for any of these to be included in the Elder Scrolls 6. I mean, they put Morthal into Skyrim. You're telling me more shit happens in Morthal than these three places? Unlikely. Something I thought was interesting was the description of Johads. These are the water catchers the Redguards use to absorb moisture from the air and turn it into clean drinking water. This was pretty cool to learn about and makes logical sense. I think it's highly likely we would see Johads in Sentinel anywhere where desert is present. This does beg the question about Sentinel's geography. I know in the teaser it's mainly rock, sand, but there's still a fair bit of greenery. In ESO, Sentinel and its surrounding area is just a desert. Another interesting point of interest in ESO is Salas En, an Ayleid ruin. It does make sense that one would be here. We know Hammerfell was inhabited by the elves long before the Yokudans, but this was kind of neat to explore. Salas En was built in the Merithic era by human slaves, and your quest is to run around, kill a bunch of elves, and activate portals. It's not super interesting. There is a puzzle deeper inside with a trapped orc who's been in prison for hundreds of years, so we set that guy free. I wish we got a little bit more about the Ayleids or the left-handed elves of Hammerfell, but I think it's fairly likely we would see these ruins scattered about in the Elder Scrolls 6. Not as much as Oblivion, but I do think they're not going to be super rare to discover. They'll be fairly common. As far as Salas En specifically, I'm not sure. This was made for ESO, so if we do see it, it'll be a direct reference to this game rather than something that already existed in the lore. One point of interest I am almost certain will be in the next game, if it is indeed set in the Kingdom of Sentinel, is Leki's blade. It's quite easy to spot due to the massive fucking rock carved in the shape of a hand holding a shattered sword. Redguards of all ages seek training here, and the school is incredibly strict, forcing students to learn about culture and history before they can even wield their blades. This is kind of like the High Hrothgar of Hammerfell. This is where people train under the spirits of their sword singer ancestors. It's like a hybrid of a monastery and a barracks. The quest here has to do with vampires, so whatever, but at one point we do get to drink a potion and collect the artifacts of the previous masters of Leki's blade. Again, this will be like 1,000 years before the Elder Scrolls 6. It's possible this place is just a relic of the past, but I would be surprised if there's no mention of it in the new game, both due to its historical importance and its looming stature over the landscape. It's quite a hard landmark to miss. Outside of points of interest, there's not too much worth bringing up. I spent about 4 hours catching every fucking fish in this entire zone for some stupid reason. Sometimes they have lore on them. They didn't this time. But hey, write down the fish's names on a piece of paper. If the next game has fishing and one of these is in there, it'll all have been worth it. I don't know why there's so many people in this zone. I can't imagine this is all hype for the upcoming game titled Sentinel, but who knows? Maybe it is. Specifically, the dolmens had an insane amount of people running them. If you know why, let me know in the comments. Let's head a little bit north to Bangkorai. Half of this zone is Highrock and the other half is Hammerfell, but I did most of the story content here just to see if there was anything interesting. One of the most important landmarks is Bangkorai Pass. This has lore on it dating back to the First Era and was used to defend Highrock from Hammerfell invaders as it guards one of the very few choke points into the region. This would likely be a lore-friendly obstacle, stopping the player from scaling out of bounds. It's one of the largest and oldest structures in the entire region. I would be shocked if we can't at least see it in the distance, just like you can see the Imperial City from within Skyrim. However, if there's a DLC that takes us into Highrock, this pass will undoubtedly be used. The second half of Bangkorai's main story takes us into the southern half of the map. There are two important areas here, the Hall of Heroes and Hallin's Stand, a major city. In both places, our goal is to push out the Imperials, but let's dive a little bit deeper than that. The Hall of Heroes might be the most important religious temple for the Redguards. If the Elder Scrolls 6 is set anywhere near here, there is almost no way Bethesda could get away with ignoring this. Maybe they could write it off in a way that it got buried by a sandstorm or something, but the Redguards would excavate for this holy site. There's no shot it wouldn't be in the game. This is where the legends of Yokudan and Redguard history are buried. Thrandur HoonDing, his son Divad, and Michaela Leki. Leki has a book that appears in both the Elder Scrolls Online and Daggerfall, recounting her life in the teaching of Thrandur HoonDing's Book of Circles, which is a collection of proverbs on the creation and use of swords. Again, if we're doing sword singing shit in the next game, the Book of Circles will absolutely make an appearance in some degree. According to Daggerfall and the Elder Scrolls Adventures Redguard, in the lore book Redguards, Their Heroes in History, it's said by the time HoonDing was 30, he became virtually invincible with the sword. And, after ascending to this level, became a hermit atop a mountain for 16 years. Here, he created his philosophy, The Way of the Sword, which he wrote down in the Book of Circles. See? I told you it would be important. On top of that, the Hall of Heroes also has a direct connection to the Far Shores, the Redguard paradise where warriors can continue to be warriors for the rest of their days. Let's talk about Hallin's Stand, named after Derek Hallin, the last surviving sword singer of Yokudan. In addition to being named after this city, he also has a waterfall named after him in Redguard. However, it is not there in ESO. I don't know how that's physically or logistically possible, so we're just going to ignore that. Anyway, Hallin was a pretty powerful sword singer and was able to defend this city from giant goblins by summoning every single previous sword singer ever in spectral form, so nothing to laugh about. To be honest, though, I would be surprised if we see Hallin's Stand in the Elder Scrolls 6. It has a bit of a reputation of being destroyed and rebuilt by other civilizations. In ESO, we're told the very bottom foundations are Orcish, then Redguard, then Breton, then Redguard. So it might make an appearance, but I'd wager it'd be a ruin or a dungeon, or maybe it's called something completely different. Here's another crackpot theory, just full speculation before we wrap this video up. ESO recently spent a shit ton of money and time making a new tutorial for the game. This took place inside the Adamantine Tower, or otherwise known as the Durrani Tower from the Elder Scrolls II Daggerfall. Where is this tower located? On the Isle of Balfira in the Iliac Bay. Now, why would they have gone through so much effort to make this tutorial zone only for it to be magically wiped without explanation barely a year later? Well, some leaks suggest Sentinel's main plot will heavily revolve around this tower, so perhaps the Elder Scrolls Online team were asked to remove it. Again, no real evidence from me here, it's just a little sus if you ask me. That's about all the noticeable or important locations, history, and pieces of culture I could find in ESO that we might see in the Elder Scrolls VI Sentinel. Unless, of course, this was a giant bamboozle and it's going to take place something completely different. Knowing Bethesda, that could very well be possible. It took me about 20 hours to play through both Bangkorai and the Alik'r Desert, so if you enjoyed this video, please consider dropping a like and subscribing to the channel. These videos are made possible by my members. Consider joining the channel to get exclusive perks, early access to videos, and the ability to vote on what games I play next. Special thank you to SauceDaddy86, Metalhead443, Designated Medic, and Arachon5 for the additional support. Becoming a member is completely optional, but I appreciate it all the more. I've been Frostbreak. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.